so busy right now. I just don't
have the time.
Just don't have time.
They'll just say no.
They'll just say no.
They'll just say no. They always do.
They always do.
They always do. It's not like
I'm an evangelist.
Not like I'm an evangelist.
I don't want anyone to think I'm a religious fanatic.
They think I'm a religious fanatic.
I'm afraid of being rejected.
I'm afraid of being rejected.
What a story we do have to tell. When you think about what a story we have to tell. You know, you want to say today we're finishing up the series on Risen or last week, but this kind of just goes right along with it. We spent all of April and now we step into May, and we looked at Easter, the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ through the eyes of the people who were there. The Romans, the soldiers, the crowd, the disciples, bystanders who just happened to be there. And we looked, we looked at all of those things. And then we last week we said the only logical response to seeing all that is that we have to choose. We have to choose whether we accept it or reject it. And there's no other choices. There's no other road left for us to go down. Well, there's one thing left on this list that we talk after we talk about something like the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, is that what are we going to do with the story? Now, we may accept it ourselves, but what are we going to do after that? You see, because the story is not over until we tell it. Jesus left us with the job of telling his story. And this is the best time of the year to talk about telling the story, to have conversations with people. It's fresh in our minds. It's a few weeks outside of celebrating Easter, so it should be fresh on our minds. But the truth is, no matter what time of year it is, let's just be honest. The truth is, no matter what time of year it is, Easter or not, Christians don't do a very good job of telling the story. Inviting people to be a part of the story, making God's story their story as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at one of the conversations that Jesus had. Jesus always had conversations with people. And we're going to look at a very familiar one to us, a conversation he had with a woman as she sat at the well, or he sat at the well when she came to draw water. And we can learn so many things from what Jesus, how he handled that situation, that will make us better storytellers, make us better people of sharing the story, inviting people to be part of that story. So I want to say something to you here today. You know, preachers all the time, we think about what we're going to preach about, and we'll say, now this one's really dramatic. We'll get in our minds, this story's really good, or this is going to be really... Look, there's nothing dramatic about today. But there's some very practical things here. Please listen. Please listen and look at what Jesus did. Write down some notes. If you see yourself where you're doing good or you're not doing good, there's some places here that we can learn from. So let's get going here. John chapter 4, Jesus has decided to travel to Galilee. And to do that, he chooses to go through Samaria. And in Samaria, he stops and at a little town called Sychar. And that's where we're going to pick up. In John chapter 4, starting with verse 6, it says this. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Now, the first thing we're going to see right here is that Jesus does a good job of something that must be taken care of right off the bat. He broke down barriers. And that's what we need to do. We need to break down barriers. Jesus, right off the bat, had 3 barriers. She was a woman, and that doesn't sound like a big problem to us, but in that day it was, because men and women, unless you were married or part of a family, you didn't talk in public. But he overcame that barrier. She was a Samaritan woman, and that was a no-no as well. Samaritans and Jews did not speak to each other. They did not get along. And the third one is this, that you maybe not have ever thought about. He was tired. He was tired. That's a barrier we have, isn't it? We get to the end of the day, end of the week, and we're tired. 3 barriers right off the bat: social, racial, and physical, that he had to overcome. But he found a way. And the secret and the truth here is this: every person we're going to talk to, there are natural barriers. So unless we get good at breaking down barriers or getting through barriers, there's going to be very few people that we will share our story with. Every person has a barrier. Some of the barriers are out here. They're just things that are out there, like the social and barriers and stuff. But most of them are right here. They're right here. So whether they're out here or in here, we got to find a way to get through them. We got to get rid of all the reasons that stop us from just inviting, from talking to people, sharing the story. You see, there are a lot of reasons not to, but there's one reason that overpowers them all. And that's to get the chance to tell the story. Do you realize that sometimes when you just a simple invitation to bring somebody to come to church with you, that you possibly can be changing the destiny for eternity of someone? That you may not even know it, but a person beginning to come to church, you may save a marriage that you didn't even know there was a problem in the marriage. You may save a family. You may save some from going into an addiction. You never know. It's not for us to know, but there's the power in just breaking down those barriers and asking someone. Did you see where on television and on social media where the Good Samaritans in Texas this past week, where the car had overturned in the water and the children, it was an infant and just a little toddler, they were trapped in the car underwater. And you see where the Samaritans, and if you see the video and stuff, where they're going underwater and they get these kids out and they save them. Do you think there was risk? Do you think there were barriers? Do you think there were fears involved? But unless you take those risks, unless you get rid of the barriers and find some way through them, there's never a moment of rejoicing where you get to rejoice over someone being saved. Look, the barriers out there are not nearly, the barriers out here are not nearly as big as the barriers that are in here. Do you think Jesus ever talked to someone and they didn't listen? You know he did. So what are we afraid of? If they didn't listen to Jesus, if they rejected him, didn't think he was cool, didn't think he was smart, then what are we afraid of? So don't let that fear cripple you. Second thing is this. This may sound strange to some of you. It's just simply just be real. Be who you are. One of the best things a person can do is just pay attention. Keep your eyes open. Keep your ears even open more to listen for opportunities, to listen to people when they talk. Please, if you're one of those shy people, kind of introverted person, and you always think that inviting and sharing is not for you, you could be one of the best there is because you will at least listen. Those people that are just out there all the time, sometimes we don't listen very well. But you'll listen. Just listen for the opportunity. Listen to those people, and then be ready to share. Life is real, and people's problems are real, and their needs are real. Talk about these things. When you listen to them, you'll pick up that there's problems. You don't have to be a perfect person. You don't have to be a preacher. Just be you. Notice what's going on around you. People don't want to know about God until they realize that God is interested in them and that God can help them in their lives. That's what Jesus does. He just listened. He was real about who he was, and he got to stuff that was real about life. You notice what he did? He starts a conversation about what? Water. He's at a well. He's thirsty. She's drawing water. So he just talks about water. And that led to something else. He talks about, he says, if I've got water, if you ever drink, you'll never be thirsty again. Listen to what it says here in verses 15 through 18. The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. And Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." Now, to be honest, Jesus has some advantages we don't have. He knows everything. He sees the future. He sees the heart. He sees the past. He can see. Now, and he does have a lot of advantages we don't. But the point is this. Jesus made faith real to her. He took it to a place that was real. He talks about her life. He talks about water and ties them all together. Depending on what kind of situation you're in, that's what we do. We just make things real. Be real yourself. Make your invitation about real life. About just don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to make the invitation about something that it isn't. And I'll give you some examples here a little later. But that leads us to that very important thing that it's so easy to overlook. Give an invitation. Invite. Share something with them that takes them to a next step. It would be such a waste if Jesus had engaged this conversation with this woman and got through the barriers of him being tired and the barrier of her being a Samaritan and her being a woman and him a man, and then it never going anywhere. Conversation is nice, and sometimes that's just the planting of the seed, but it needs to get somewhere. So Jesus not only talks to her, but he says, you need a drink of this living water. He says, go get your husband. We'll talk about it. He gave a very natural invitation. Now, what is a natural invitation to us? It depends on the situation that we're in. Now, let's listen to a couple of things that I've come up with and things that I've been able to do myself, and it becomes very natural. You can be in line at Food Lion, and you notice a woman behind you that's got 2, 3 kids, and they're about to drive her crazy, and they're pulling stuff off the shelf, and she's putting it back on the shelf. You can just say, you got your handful, don't you? And she's going to say, I sure do. You want one of them? They're going to say something like that. And then you can, if you've had children, you can just, in a 5-second go, say, I've been where you're at. Let me just mention something to you. I don't know if you have a church that you go to, but at Macedonia, we have a great youth program. And I bet some of your kids know some of the kids there. I wish you'd come out and try that out sometime. That's a very natural invitation. Or you have a coworker or a neighbor, and you know that something big is coming up at church, and you just say, I wonder if your kids would enjoy going to play laser tag this Sunday with our kids. I know mine are going, and they're so excited about it. I'm going to go too, but I'm not going to play. Would you like to go along? Bring your kids? That's very natural. It's not threatening. It's just natural. Or you can know a friend or a neighbor who's having a hard time, a coworker. They know they're suffering. They're going through a tough time, and you can just quietly say to them, You know, I was having a tough time, and you can just say when. And the church helped me so much, just the fact of being there. Would you come with me and just see if being there helps you the way it did me? Those are very natural invitations. It's just real. Survey after survey after survey has shown that the majority, the overwhelming majority of people who are in church, the people who have a relationship with Jesus Christ, are there because somebody invited them to be there. And survey after survey after survey shows that people who we think would not come say, well, I don't go, but if somebody asked me, I'd go give it a try. That's the people that you think would not go, or saying, well, if somebody asked me, I would go. So what are we doing? You see, an invitation can change everything. What's the date today? Say it out loud. May 7th. Tell me what happened to January, February, March, and April. We're in the 5th month of the year. What happened, y'all? We were just having Christmas. And if you're waiting to give that invitation, to talk to someone, time is going by. We're going to blink an eye, and I'm going to be standing up here and saying Happy 4th of July to y'all here in just, it's going to seem like a week or two. An invitation can change everything, but we can't wait. The time is now, because like I say, we're going to blink our eye, and time is flying past so fast that we're going to miss the opportunity. Have your eyes open, your ears wide open, be who you are, be real about life, and find a way to invite. Let's keep going and notice something else here. We go back again to John 4, and Jesus talking as he's talking to this woman, the disciples come back from going into town to buy food. Verse 28. Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" They came out of the town and made their way toward him. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him food?" "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say 4 months more and then the harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest." Do you understand what's happening here? Because of what is happening, joy is taking over their lives. Here's a woman whose priority in life was to get water, to come draw water, to carry water back to her house. And because of what is happening here, because of her meeting Jesus, because of an invitation, because he was real about things and he talked about real life, she leaves her water jar. She doesn't even take it back. She leaves and goes back and tells her whole town about Jesus. Jesus, who was tired, who was hungry, all of a sudden says, "I don't need food. I've got something more fulfilling than food or water could ever give me. I've got the joy of living a fulfilled life, of knowing something different in this life." Now, this is the very next thing we need to learn from Jesus, and that's find joy. Find joy in these things. You want to really change, because I really think all of us want to say, "I wish I would invite better. I wish I did this more." You know, our Christian life is spent with, "I wish I did this better. I wish I did." You want to really change? You want to become an agent of change? You want to be like those good Samaritans who saved those 2 children out of a car submerged in water? Then you got to find joy in it. You got to find joy in doing these things, that you enjoy inviting the lady in line at Food Line, or the neighbor, or seeing somebody at church, or when you walk into church and you see people here and it's a full church, that you find actual joy in that. You've got to allow yourself to do that. And that's the key word, allow yourself to find joy in these different things. And I'm convinced that the big problem in the American church is that we've got so many things that bring us temporary joy that we don't give the things of eternal joy much of a chance. Those things are pushed away because we've got so much temporary joy here on earth. We think we need all of those things out there. And you can name them for yourselves, the things that take your time, but they become our priorities and they become our pursuits. But if we'll give the act of sharing Jesus and seeing a life change, or just the simple fact of inviting somebody and they come, the joy that's in that, if we'll give that a chance, we'll find that that's real joy. That's what's real happiness in life. Let me ask you something here. Are you a joyful Christian? Are you joyful about being a Christian? When you come to church, are you joyful about it? When you think about your church, does it bring you joy? When you read about your Savior, when you study and pray, do you have joy about Him? Or, when the church comes to your mind, that you immediately think of the things that aren't right. That I wish this. I wish the preacher would do this. I wish we would sing this song. I wish we wouldn't sing that song. I wish it was hotter. I wish it was cooler. I wish, and when you think of the church, when you think of your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, is it something you find wrong, or do you find joy in them? Do you find yourself complaining or criticizing or blaming, or do you find joy? Now, these are hard because we usually don't see them in ourselves. We see them in others. But if we examine, just start thinking about some of the thoughts and conversations you have about your church, about your relationship with the Lord. And I can tell you why. If you're not that joyful Christian, I can tell you why. You stop giving Him away. You stop sharing what Jesus is, who Jesus is, what He's about. You stop sharing it. So everything's coming in, but just nothing's going out. And I'll tell you, if you're not telling people, you're not inviting people, you're not going to be joyful. That is a missing ingredient. That is not going to be replaced until you start telling the story. You know, I think that's why new members, new Christians, new members will invite more people to come to church with them in the first 6 months than us longtime Christians will invite in 6 years. Because they're excited. They're excited about what they found. And somehow over the time, we lose that joy. And then we start seeing what makes us happy in the church and not what would bring us real joy by telling the story. Well, let me mention one more thing here. Go to verse 39. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to Him, they urged Him to stay with them, and He stayed 2 days. And because of His words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, "We no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world." It was some time back, Greg Webb went into a fast food restaurant, and they'd been advertising this new thing, a new sandwich or whatever. And so he went in and asked for that. And the girl wasn't very familiar. They hadn't even made it up onto the board yet. They had some signs. Well, he ordered it one way. They delivered it the other way. And so he carried it back up, and he said, I ordered this. And she took it back, and she said, come back and says, "I'm sorry for the trouble. I'm sorry for your wait. It's probably no good." Way to go. Confidence. Sell them sandwiches. But if you don't have confidence in what you're talking about, what you're doing, very little room for success. And that's one thing Jesus does. He expected God to work. He expected God to show up. And we need to expect God to work. This woman knew Jesus for 1 day, and she had enough confidence in what she had heard to go back, put herself on the line, step out there, and tell her whole town about it. Now, you and I have had a whole lot more information than one conversation, 1 day of knowing about God. Where is our confidence? Where is our confidence not just in ourselves, but our confidence more in Him? It's His story. We don't have to do anything but tell His story or invite people to come and say, I want you to share. I want you to be able to hear what I'm hearing. I want you to know what I know. He's the one who's done everything. It's not us. I'm sure you've heard the story because so many times we're like this. Like the two hikers, they're on the Appalachian Trail and they're hiking and they come up and they surprise a big bear. And so the bear starts chasing them and they just drop their backpacks and just take off running. And one guy turns to him and he says, you really think we can outrun this bear? Another guy says, I ain't got to outrun the bear. I just got to outrun you. You know. And I think sometimes we're like that. That we think we've got to do everything. We got to have it all together. It's all got to be in place, and we got to know everything we're going to say. And Jesus says, no, just tell. Just invite. Just be real about it. We don't have to do everything. God already has. That's the point. He's already done it. He's already provided the story. We just want more people to hear the story. Make it part of their story. We just have to step out, be willing to do these things. Jesus said to the disciples, the fields are ripe to harvest. Now. That's what he said. They're now ready. Are you ready for ready fields? How many people do you think you come in contact with a day? I don't know. But in all of those people you come in contact with, because I've expanded it here, not just a family, not just a close friend, I'm talking about Walmart, Food Line, the drugstore, work. How many people do you come in contact with? Do you see them as a field that is ripe for harvest? Or do you just see people? You know, as you look at these things here, the things that Jesus could really teach us on how he handled situations. And I'm not saying you need supernatural powers like Jesus had, but we can do these things. And as you look at these things, you see some things you're probably not doing. And you see some things I'm doing, but I could do better. We just got to do them. Jesus said, look around you at the harvest. It's ready and it's right for now. In case you don't realize it, the people you come in contact with throughout the day, throughout your week, that you're running into people who are lost for eternity. They know not Jesus. They do not know, as Jamie sings about, they don't have a hope of heaven someday. You run into people who at once had known Christ, but have drifted away, have fallen away. Not just drifted, they're fallen away. The Bible talks about bringing those people back. What a great reward that is. That's the people you run into. Now, we've got a good crowd here today. And sometimes it's harder when it's a big crowd. But you're going to see people, you see empty spaces because somebody used to sit there. And if you'll think about it for a few minutes, you remember, yeah, I hadn't seen them in a while. It's been a year or more since they've been here. And you can just begin to think, there's people who are drifting away. An invitation, a reach out, a touch might be the thing that brings them back and saves them from so many things that they don't want and they don't need to be a part of. The fields are ripe to harvest. We don't even have to look further than where we're sitting today to see some empty spaces where someone used to sit. Are you ready?